Captain Midnight.
This video is brought to you by Ground News. A few weeks ago, I made a video about how I was worried about Netflix's then upcoming Avatar remake. Seeing the trailer had me concerned that it was going to be mostly an uninspired rehash with awkward acting, but I also said this. I'm really excited to see more of the entire Fire Nation cast in general. If I see one area of The Last Airbender where I think an adaptation aimed at a slightly older audience could really benefit the story they're telling, it's Zuko's family and the political jockeying and brutality of the Fire Nation leadership. And you know what? I think for better or worse, I ended up being right on both things here. There were some elements this season I absolutely could not stand, and some real low points to the show that were every bit as bad as my worst expectations. But I have to say, especially by the end of the season, I did find myself with some positive thoughts, and most of them have to do with Zuko and the handling of the Fire Nation. I'm gonna try to cover both some of those negatives and that positive here. So okay, the first thing I have to get out of the way, and feel free to disagree with me on this, I'm betting people are pretty split about it, but I really do not like how hard this production leaned on the volume technology for its sets. Made famous by The Mandalorian, the volume is like a giant high-res LED screen that surrounds the set, creating virtual environments. It's very high-tech and renders things in real time, which allows actors on a soundstage to interact with its digital environments as if they were on a real set. It's an impressive piece of technology that I don't want to take too much away from. I do believe it can be used really well, but I do think there's a real danger in relying on it for nearly everything, and it seems that's kind of what we got here. While it can work okay in expansive, outdoorsy settings, like especially forests, I think it really fails when depicting cities and more complex backgrounds. Visually, I think Amashu is the series' low point. We're constantly told what a dirty, filthy city it's become. That fact is very important to the story being told here. It ties in closely to Bumi's pessimistic indifference as a leader, which is something that Aang helps him overcome. But this falls a little flat when the city looks and feels so sterile and unconvincing. There's never a feeling that this is a real city with a sense of dirt and grit. It feels more like a screensaver. And this screensaver vibe just haunts this series. Not always, but a lot of the time. Now, I'm sure they did do a solid amount of it, but I really wish they had had more impressive physical sets and allowed this technology just to supplement that. Instead, it begins to seem kind of claustrophobic. To me at least, that soundstage feel just never truly goes away. It's just something that I had to get used to and eventually, begrudgingly, accept. I will say the fight choreography can be fun, if a bit slow, and there were some really interesting usages of the bending powers. I especially liked Katara's ice discs every time she used them. Speaking of Katara, let's kind of go through this cast a bit. The main trio is fine. Okay, sometimes, especially in the early episodes, they were as stilted and as awkward as I had feared. The fact is, casting child actors is hard, casting this many of them even harder, and making them all act in what was probably this giant soundstage void for a lot of the show, well, yeah, that was probably also tough at times. Both Aang and Katara have their incredibly wooden moments, but I wouldn't say it's completely across the board. Aang is a really difficult character to cast in live action. You have to find a kid who has the convincing physicality to do fight scenes, while also needing to be goofy, light, then filled with serious moments of self-doubt, and be a badass warrior at times. It was too tall a task for the actor in the 2010 movie, and I think it is here too. Though I do believe he got better as the show went on and actually played off Zuko pretty well. It was a serviceable performance with moments that were a little embarrassing, and I guess I'd say something similar for Katara. Sokka is a different story. He's not a child actor, and I think that comes through as his performance has a lot more specificity to it and actually feels like he's making real character choices. And here's the thing, I do think he's doing everything asked of him well. The voice, the cadence, the physicality, it's clear he's putting a lot of effort into making these jokes work. maybe a little too much. But really, I think the issue is, 1, a lot of this dialogue is bad, and 2, maybe most importantly, unlike the old show which could animate Sokka's shenanigans in a fast-paced, cartoonish style, something about the editing here just feels off. It's just not snappy enough. There's no comedic rhythm to it, which makes it feel like they're doing Sokka a little bit dirty. But okay, like I said, I did find some positive things to be found here, so let's get into that. I really enjoy the Zuko and Fire Nation stuff on this show. Sure, it's not safe from the often ugly environments or awkward line readings that this show has a lot of, but I at least think the writers went in with some clear and interesting things to say about this side of the cast. Whereas the rest of the show feels like it had to strip down and simplify the adventures of Aang, Katara, and Sokka, the Fire Nation characters seem like they're the ones who actually got to expand on something and bring new ideas to the table that weren't in service of just streamlining the plot. Basically, with the Fire Nation, they got to add some complexity here instead of just taking it away. The idea that Zuko is banished to find the Avatar along with the crew that he lost his old life defending is a very good one. Seriously, it's a smart, clever way to make Zuko's story better and make that crew feel more meaningful. It's not like Zuko's relationship with his 41st Division got a ton of attention, but it was there. Their hatred for him was very understandable at the start. He's brash and loud, trying to replicate the authority his father projects with none of the respect or gravitas to pull it off. But as you watch them slowly gain that respect for him, especially after the revelation that he saved their lives, it feels pretty earned and organic. Overall, it's a nice, almost subtle touch in a show that usually had no place for that. And the character is well cast, with Dallas Liu capturing both the adolescent angst and determination of Zuko well. And I'm really looking forward to seeing his performance change as Zuko matures. Now, I would say this Zuko is very in line with the one from the original, but Iroh has been changed more significantly than it might seem at first glance. Cartoon Iroh, especially in Season 1, tended to have a detached, laid-back quality to him, a little Yoda-like at times. I get less of that sense here. From the very first episode, Iroh seems incredibly worried about his nephew, and his demeanor is a bit less smooth and less graceful. Iroh doesn't get to stand apart from the action as much, and finds himself drawn into conflicts a little bit more. Part of this is just that they wanted to give Iroh meatier material earlier, just like most of the Fire Nation characters. But the result of that is that Iroh doesn't seem to have it all figured out in the way that he does in the animated version. It is a change, and it's hard to top the original, which I do still have more fondness for, but I don't think it's an entirely unwelcome one. And it makes Iroh feel more emotionally accessible to us as an audience in Season 1. As does the choice to show us his backstory a bit sooner and present a much clearer picture. I really like the flashbacks of him and young Zuko comforting each other or adjusting his armor. What I'd really like to see more of, and something I'm hopeful in Season 2, is a better sense of his relationship with his brother. But what's here I think is still really poignant, because the DNA of that Iroh-Zuko dynamic is just incredibly strong stuff. In Zuko, the Fire Lord can only see a disappointment, a weak link in the family that needs to show if he'll sink or swim. Where Iroh sees a promising and essentially good-hearted young man, like the one he lost at Ba Sing Se. It worked in the animated series, and an expanded version of it is very welcome here. I also liked Iroh being confronted by the Earth Kingdom soldier about his brutality in the war. That was easily my favorite part of what I thought was an otherwise pretty bleh episode, as it presented us this kindly old man in a totally new light. And you can see it rattled him, as he shows mercy to the soldier just to prove that he's not that person anymore, and is nearly fatally injured for it. I thought this was all really enjoyable, and to be honest, almost none of the Aang gang side of the story came close. I could keep harping on that, but let's keep talking about the Fire Nation instead. I think they cast Azula and her crew well, even if they spend a lot of the season kind of standing around complaining about how they want to go out and actually do something. You know who I thought was the real breakout though? Ken Leung as Admiral Zhao. Like, was it just me, or did Zhao steal nearly every scene he was in? In a show with fairly wooden performances and awkward dialogue, Zhao brought a malevolent ease to every situation. His smarmy contempt for nearly everyone he spoke to was always radiating through the screen in a way that felt entirely believable. The actor is able to take some very clunky lines and just make him sing. And hey, as a Lost fan, it was great to see a Miles and Jin reunion here. Daniel Dae Kim was imposing and solid as Ozai, but I think future seasons is where he'll really get to shine, as we're never quite sure if anything but power is important to him, even his own children. So all that being said, would I recommend Netflix Avatar? Honestly, not really. I just can't bring myself to do it when there's a much better version of this story out there. Honestly, if not for this channel, I think I would have tapped out after episode 4. But on the positive side, I did think the last 3 episodes showed some signs of improvement. The Fire Nation characters didn't disappoint, and the finale ended things on a fairly high note. So I'm a little torn on this one. I don't think it's a train wreck, but the aspects of it that were bad were very, very bad. There was some interesting stuff here, and since it is already renewed for season 2, I guess we'll get to see if the show is able to double down on what worked and improve what didn't, or if it'll stay at this level and I'll probably lose my interest in it pretty quickly. Here's hoping it's the former. "There is no war in Ba Sing Se" is one of the most famous quotes in Avatar history, so chilling it sticks with people. But unlike the residents of a certain Earth Kingdom capital, you don't have to live in a bubble. That's why Ground News is such a helpful tool. This is an app that gives you a vast array of national and international news stories, offering insights from renowned sources across continents and cultures. There's always a lot of arguments about, say, the state of the economy, and one thing Ground News is so good at is showing you a ton of stories about a topic like that in a way that's determined to paint you a very broad picture of what's out there. It's really cool because it'll show you a story like this one, say Apple deciding to drop its electric car development and focus on AI, and show you who is reporting on it, what side of the political aisle the publication tends to slant, and you can compare for yourself how the coverage is handled from these different perspectives, creating a much more accurate picture. And that's why I especially like the blind spot feature, which highlights stories that are disproportionately covered by one side of the political spectrum, in a way that's clean, readable, and so easy to grasp. That feels more essential than ever, with so many of us relying on social media algorithms that tend to just serve us stories it thinks we're predisposed to agree with and want to see. And Ground News doesn't stop there. They track accuracy and bias too, with each source evaluated for reliability and transparency. So compare news coverage from diverse sources from around the world on a transparent platform driven by data. Plus, they have a great deal going on. Get 40% off by trying Ground News today at ground.news/captainmidnight, or click on that link down in the description.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once, because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started, because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes too.